Everyone, and welcome to the next in Community Care Smart Assistive Technology collaborative series of webinars. My name is Kimberly Mills and I'll be the chair and moderator of today's webinar for the collaborative. This webinar is a part of a series of sessions being facilitated by the Community Resourcing for the Community Care Smart Assistive Technology Collaborative. At Community Resourcing, we use our international expertise and networks to build community capacity through empowerment, knowledge transfer, skills enhancement, research and development projects. I acknowledge the support provided for this project by the Queensland Government Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services. This support is helping to bring together an online platform for community care service providers who are interested in collaborating on issues and practices related to the smart assistive technology, as well as to undertake events such as this webinar. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the individual members of the Collaborative Expert Reference Team who have contributed on a voluntary basis to the development of this project. Please note that neither Community Resourcing nor the Department of Communities, Child Safety and Disability Services are promoting or endorsing any particular product, research, entity or organisation. Our webinars serve to inform viewers of examples of various smart assistive technologies in development and or deployment. A bit of housekeeping. As attendees at today's session and in the interest of the recording, we have muted microphones. If you have any questions, please add these to the questions panel on the dashboard and there'll be an opportunity at the end of the session to have these answered. Today's session will be delivered by Stewart Koplick from Endeavour Foundation and will be focused on digital inclusion and disability and exploring the why of technology for the disability and education sector. Stewart leads an exciting virtual learning environment project at Endeavour Foundation employing the virtual reality headset Oculus Rift. He also manages the Education, Learning and Development Department at Endeavour Foundation, and he is an experienced educator with a belief in the power of new technologies to transfer the lives of people with a disability. Now I'll pass over to Stewart to get started on his presentation.
Fantastic, thank you Kimberly. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and obviously talk about technology and I guess the why of technology, particularly within the disability space, but obviously within the education space as well. So yeah, as you mentioned, both myself and another colleague, Chris Beaumont, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, we're I guess really playing around in this kind of technology space at the moment and trying to utilize some cutting edge technology, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to explore particularly how people with disability might actually respond to or learn or engage in order to provide them with some supports and whatever their kind of goal or their pathway is. And certainly as we move into ideas, for example, the NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme, it's all about trying to understand how technology may in fact provide supports for people, but also how it can certainly create these inclusive type spaces. So we can see under the NDIS that people with disabilities can actually receive funding, for example, for purchases of types of technologies. But we can also now start to see how various types of software programs, it may be, for example, Product Quota Go, or the virtual type software, the virtual reality type software that we're developing, can support people in various aspects. So, for example, it may be as a communication type device or a communication piece of software, but there may be some learning or some training elements behind that. And what we're certainly trying to do at Endeavour Foundation is look at how we can develop this content and create new ways and new modes of learning that can then be deployed within our sites such that people then can access that software or that content to basically take them from where they are now to a place where they previously may not have thought was possible or even dreamed of. And the NDIS, I guess, is providing those types of supports as well, and with people being funded and being able to have that choice and control, they can decide, yeah, look, I'm really interested in maybe going to or purchasing supports from Endeavour Foundation. It may be another type of organisation, and that's fine. But certainly, utilising technology and taking kind of what is out there at the moment, and even developing new products that don't currently exist, we can, I guess, provide different types of support, and people may be interested in purchasing those supports from us. So I guess, you know, that's where the NDIS component of it sits. With digital inclusion, however, we believe begins with the idea of human-centered design, and this is certainly the idea of digital inclusion. It's not about you or I or you know, someone from off the street, or even mum or dad, or an expert in the field, being able to tell a person with a disability that, hey, you need to be doing this, or you need to be, you know, using this piece of software or hardware. It's about understanding and starting with the person and putting them at the center. And there's, you know, there's other ways of calling this as well. There's person-centered practice, you know, human-centered design. It's basically creating new solutions that are tailor-made for that particular person. So it's about engaging with that person first and foremost, and being able to understand where they're coming from, and is it the best fit, or is it the right, you know, piece of hardware or software for that actual person. The design is based on understanding and designing solutions collaboratively. Gone are the days, I think, where it's about, you know, the teacher at the front, for example, knowing what's best, or mum and dad. Obviously, they bring knowledge and understanding to the table, but it needs to be a collaborative approach, because certainly what, you know, works for you or I, or what works for a person with a disability may not work for that other particular person. So it's about understanding that and then trying to work out how technology collaboratively can actually work for that person. And so I guess that's where you see a lot of different applications, different types of hardware, customized pieces of hardware as well. So, you know, take a person with cerebral palsy who may not have that physical capability to be able to maneuver a joystick or perhaps type or what have you. What exists, or what can we create that will actually provide a solution for that particular person? So that's kind of where we're coming from. Everything comes from that human-centered design. We then need to look at other ideas, and we mentioned person-centered practice. It's about social role valorization, and it's about you and your community. So, and I've said this before in a number of other presentations, but it's about, you know, technology does not discriminate. You know, if I take a computer, if I take an iPad or a tablet or what have you, you know, I can use it, you can use it in any particular way. It's basically when people apply their, I guess, their own thoughts and their own philosophies behind it that we start to see that discrimination take place. But we can have access to various types of content or hardware, which also then equals access to opportunity. So again, we mentioned Prolo Quote to Go as a communication type of device, which would work for one particular person. A different type of app would work for someone else. And it allows people then to have an equal playing field, I think. You know, you could imagine what it would be like to literally have no voice physically, perhaps, if you were nonverbal, but then be able to hear, you know, your words, your ideas being spoken quite literally via an application. And that's some of what we've seen, particularly in some of our services, whereby we've had people who are almost nonverbal are able to present and give a speech via an application, and literally for the first time we've been able to hear their voice. And you can see, you know, the celebration and the positivity, I guess, that comes from that when people are able to access that type of technology. It also, technology, I guess, looks at the behavioural aspects of people. So, you know, with the virtual reality programs, and just to give you some context for that, I guess, we're currently developing content that utilises the Oculus Rift, and they've now brought out Oculus Touch, which is basically a handheld controls, which allow you to actually manipulate products in a virtual type of world. We've created a number of modules that relate to train safety, bus safety, automatic teller machines. So we're looking at those kind of life skills that you and I would kind of almost take for granted on a daily basis. Being able to catch a train, being able to swipe on at a go-card machine, going to the bank and withdrawing money, using an FPOS machine, ordering a cup of coffee, for example, and we're able to, via VR, replicate those scenes so that we can now literally reach out and start to have physical feedback through the controllers. So if we're bumped, if we want to swipe, we can actually have a feedback mechanism in the controller so we can feel that that has actually taken place. We can hear, we can see, all those various types of senses, I guess, come into play, and they're getting better and more effective, and in fact more affordable as well. So we're looking at taking some of that VR and eventually using, for example, haptic feedback suits. So we're able to not only get feedback through our hands, but potentially through our whole body. So you can imagine then the types of scenarios that might exist once we start to, or that we can create once we start to have that type of technology as well. In autism, in terms of social regulation, we're wanting to create scenes whereby in the VR world where you're able to engage with people and that person may or may not respond. And in fact, if they do respond, their behaviour may in fact scaffold. So a person who maybe doesn't necessarily understand or is able to logically process that type of behaviour and realise that, hey, maybe I've got to back away from that situation or say something else, we're able to create those scenes and work through that process with that particular person. So in terms of behaviours, we're able to look at maybe specific types of behaviours and via virtual reality look at solutions to, I guess, provide supports or strategies to cope with that situation. And also, it's not just disability. We've been using VR within hospitals and within mental health and within defence forces for probably the last 2 decades. And only now is it starting to look at disability and in that education space. But again, it's about that normalisation, I guess, of what technology does do. It allows everyone to be on that equal playing field. Within education, already, it's existed for quite a period of time now. We've got online learning, we've got e-learning, we've got distance education. Just down the road from here, you've got the School of Distance Ed, and we've been using those types of programs for quite a period of time to a certain degree of success. And then, within our own, we've got our own devices now, our own homes. When we're building homes, particularly these days, we're looking at smart tech, smart homes, smart classrooms. So we can walk in, lights come on, we walk out, lights go off. We can swipe on, and the window blinds come up. We can now start to link in through, tech such as Google Home, Amazon, those types of pieces of hardware where everything starts to be linked. And we can turn off the hair straightener if you've forgotten to 2 hours later or something or other. So we want to be able to go, well, what does that actually look like within a smart service, and why not? So there's plenty of opportunities for us to learn from what currently exists, but also to take the best of what's currently out there in the market and to be able to apply that to the disability education space. And for us, that looks at VR, as I've mentioned. We're looking at what we call augmented reality and mixed reality, so MR and AR. And mixed reality in particular, we believe has potential for the training side of things. So again, people with disabilities engaged in supported employment, and that might be, for example, warehouse packaging down at Wacop, at one of our sites down there, or down at Mount Druitt and Castle Hill down in Sydney. And so with MR, we're now able to, for example, take a puck, hook that up to an actual piece of equipment that you might be using within that industry, and this example might be a pallet jack, and via that puck, which is connected to a headset, virtually display that pallet jack, which is used in real time within a VR type of environment. And so what it does is allows us to go through the real motions of using a pallet jack, but able to see that within a virtual type of environment, or for example, hook that up to a nail gun, and rather than shooting real nails from an apprentice, they're able to shoot virtual nails, and there's a real safety aspect attached to that. So you get a number of apprenticeships or trainees who come through, may in fact use a nail gun initially, but then go away, come back after a number of months and have not used that gun. And we've had examples where that has actually occurred, and they've started shooting nails and put one through their hand or their foot. We can use this within an MR type of experience where they can shoot virtual nails any number of times and get used to the actual nail gun again, rather than putting real nails through their hand or foot, and that working becomes a workplace health and safety issue. So that's kind of where we're going with MR, and so we're a little bit excited with that as well, and we'll be kind of creating a number of scenarios in the next few months to try and look at pallet jacks in particular. We can also create disruption. So if we think about our train safety scenario, or for example, a person simply walking virtually from A to B, we might throw in a detour, a road closure, a dog runs out in front of you. And they may be really basic types of disruptions, but for a person with a disability who's used to kind of routine perhaps and going only one particular way, you can imagine how that might throw their routine out. And so if we can teach people how to respond to that via these disruptions in a virtual environment, where we propose that further learning will take place. So what it does do is that it creates new modes of learning, and there's an appeal across the age group. So a lot of it is based on gamification. So using ideas of virtual reality type games, but applying a learning context to it. In terms of research, and this is very important because we want to be able to show that we've evidenced the work that we're doing. In the kind of, and as I said, the last couple of decades, it's kind of where we've looked at Second Life, which is basically a web-based game where you're able to create an avatar, so your own avatar, and kind of move around in these virtual types of worlds. And there was evidence that particularly people who were in wheelchairs would actually look at their own identity and choose characters that were able to either walk or even fly. And so you have this kind of avatar or this kind of character now where all of a sudden, you're free. You're no longer bound to a wheelchair. You're able to walk around, have conversations, engage with people, physically at a different type of height. And that, for some people, is again, freedom. So, and again, we've had online environments, web-based type solutions. That's fine, and that's all good. We've taken that hopefully a little bit further, where we are now looking at virtual reality and these types of technologies. And as I said, we've spoken, as we've listed there, at a number of conferences where we've tried to promote the work that we're doing. We're also working particularly in partnership with Queensland University of Technology to look at how we can, I guess, tailor-make solutions, particularly in relation to hardware. So we've kind of done a number of joint publications with them, and we're using both undergrad or working with both undergrad and postgrad students to design new modes of learning, new ways of doing things. So that's really important for Endeavour Foundation in particular, as part of our relationship with them. And there's a number of funding and grants that go with that as well. Well, what does all that mean as I guess we move forward for Endeavour Foundation and for I guess not-for-profit organisations, and in particular, the impact of the NDIS has meant that we've had to change our business model. No longer are organisations such as Endeavour or other not-for-profits in receipt of kind of government funding, whereas it goes to the individual. And so for us, we need to be able to, we live in a market type of environment where we need to be able to, I guess, balance the selling of our of what we do with that social efficacy as well. It does, however, mean that we can look at how, by delivering training or learning, say across or utilising a platform such as VR, which can then be deployed into different sites, we could potentially have one support worker delivering that content to maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 people, whereas previously we were delivering it to only 5 people. So for us, it obviously there's a reduction potentially in overheads, and which is, you know, the cost savings can then be put towards providing further supports for people. And I mentioned lean there just in terms of a framework. There's also other types of sites that exist, and we're kind of playing around a little bit with 3D printing at the moment, where we're able to access various types of files which we can then print off for free. But then also it leads to potential micro enterprises. So a person with a disability who's interested perhaps in coding or designing or gaming could potentially start to look at designing their own type of business and then be able to deploy that, just like, again, you and I might. You've got this old way versus the new way, and as I mentioned, the support worker delivering it to maybe 4 or 5 people, whereas now we could potentially deliver it across sites and across states, or even across the world if we wanted to. It's not just focused on service delivery, we can focus on training as well, so training for staff, not just people we support. And what's really important for us is the networking and the partnerships that come from that and the potential to commercialize. So again, it's that business modeling. So we have to be smart in terms of how we look at the products and services that we're delivering. But then also, again, it gets back to that collaboration as well. You know, working with QUT, working with community resourcing to be able to promote the work we're doing and to be able to take new ideas and merge them together. And again, it all comes back to working and providing that support for people with disability. With we're talking about collaborations and partnerships, what it does do is that the tech lends itself very nicely to connecting with other types of technologies. So we've mentioned VR, mixed reality, augmented reality. I've got listed there 360. Now that's your 360 camera type of work, and again, they've been out for a little bit. 360 cameras have been utilised particularly with digital photographers, but now you can jump onto Facebook, you can jump onto YouTube and actually see 360 cameras in action, and a whole heap of kind of, you know, Nikon GoPro, so your Hero GoPros, any number of, you know, the Fly 360 have come out with 360 type cameras, and we're certainly playing around with them a little bit at the moment too. But again, to look at how 360 cameras might work as another mode of learning. And we've done some research where we've compared 360 with the Oculus Rift versus the Samsung Gear to look at, you know, which one works best. We're working with software developers, so a lot of kind of external guys who potentially have never worked with people with disability either, and so that's provided opportunities for them, A, because they're interested in doing it, because there's that kind of, again, that social advocacy idea behind it, but also because we've actually, the guy we're working with at the moment, and Chris actually presented at the VR Club down in Brisbane last week, and some of these ideas that we're kind of putting forward haven't actually been thought of before. So, you know, full-on gamers and developers are going, oh, haven't thought of that before, it's kind of crazy, really like it, let's see what we can actually do together. It also brings in animators, 3D artists, a whole heap of different people. For Endeavour Foundation, again, VR is a focus for us, but we're also looking at, as I said, 3D printing and design, the coding and the Raspberry Pi type of ideas, a lot of, and I guess this looks at what's happening within schools, as in STEM, so you focus on the science and technologies and the engineering and the maths, but it's like, well, you know, what does that actually look like for a person with disability? How can they be included in that? Do they need to be included in that? Do they want to be included in that? And is there opportunity to further a person's learning, or, you know, for them to go down the road of, well, actually, I can create something here and do something with that. We're starting to look at the impact that maybe robots are having as well, and certainly there's been, you know, robots are nothing new. There's been a lot of research and a lot of kind of prototyping and design done with robots, and particularly people with disabilities, but mainly in relation to robots acting as reminders or being able to provide supports, particularly for medicine, so people who are taking medicine. But we want to look at robots in terms of, people can actually now code and have the robot do a particular task. but also from, I guess, a type of support as well, and what it actually looks like maybe within a workplace environment, but also within a service type of environment. Drones, we've mentioned, that's because there's something to play around with at the moment. Again, that's probably more of the fun side of things, but you can imagine, again, being able to, having the opportunity to fly drones, to work out, to look at the physics behind that, to be able to manipulate, a drone. There's all the kind of filming and the photography that goes with that as well. There's the wearables, or particularly the health market. So you look at all particularly your fitness, and we're not so much playing in that space, but certainly I know, community resourcing have had a number of experts in that area, where they've done, again, a lot of research in regards to wearables. And it's the Internet of Things. So where can we go with all of this type of technology? Probably already covered this a little bit as well, but again, domain of the gamers, it's basically brought it down to a position now where we can all go in, we can go into JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman or what have you, and actually purchase this type of hardware, whereas previously it was way out of pretty much anyone's league unless there was a specific type of task or that's where their career was. But now allows us to, because it's so much more affordable, and it's a cross-platform, so no longer Windows or Apple. We're seeing these platforms or cross-platform connectivity, which obviously helps us too. So the possibilities are pretty much endless. We can create scenarios based on that HCD, that human-centered design framework, and from that, utilize different types of technology to ensure that we have inclusion take place, to ensure that we're taking ideas from mainstream, but also that we're using, I guess, the best of what exists in any type of area to be able to provide those types of support. So it could be, it could be public safety, it could be ordering a coffee. It's about involving people with disabilities to actually help map that journey as we move forward. And the technology is just continuing to evolve. So we don't know what's around the corner, but what we actually want to do is actually create what's around the corner, instead of just waiting for it to kind of happen to us. We want to be part of that journey. Yeah, so yep. That's me.
Thank you, Stuart, for your presentation. We have a few questions here. So Harry from Toowoomba says, Stuart, thanks for an interesting presentation. What do you feel is NDIS's appetite to introduce really emerging and leading edge technology?
So I think that they have an appetite for it. Certainly we haven't had any pushback from NDIS in regards to the types of technologies that we're using or talking about. And certainly we've been at expos and what have you where NDIS have been a couple tables up, and we've been presenting this type of tech, and it's got buy-in from them to the point where we've actually had questions asked of if we can actually utilize some of this tech. And you would see, House of No Steps, for example, was awarded I think it was a couple $100,000 grant over the last couple of months in regards to some of this tech, where they're looking at how they can provide supports for supported employees, for their workers, support workers. And so there is an appetite for it. But again, we're looking at delivering or utilizing VR or this type of tech or smart tech just in terms of how we do service delivery. So you won't actually be necessarily paying for that type of tech, but it's a mode of learning, and it's part of just how we do business. So people can come along to a service funded to attend a particular activity at that service, and we're simply utilizing tech to deliver that. That's where the difference is.
Yep, thank you. Sarah asks, digital inclusion is a major issue for our clients. How is Endeavour bridging the digital divide with their clients?
So it's about, I guess, looking at the type of technology that exists, but then engaging in that human-centered design process to ensure that what we're actually developing collaboratively will actually work. There's no point having all of this technology and it just sitting on a bench and going to waste. So it's ensuring that it's about bringing all of those ideas together to be able to come up with a solution, and within that framework of utilising, I guess, technology. And this is the thing, what works for one particular person may not work for another. So it's about understanding what that is, and then, you know, blue skying the possibility of saying, well, this is what actually exists in terms of tech, or can we create a new piece of hardware or software that will actually meet, you know, will provide an answer to your problem. So again, it's about understanding the person, understanding the problem, and then being able to design tech solutions to it.
Okay. Jennifer says, regarding MR, I see this as having great application in the community care, both for our workforces and our clients. Do you know of any researchers within this specific space at the
No,
moment?
actually, I don't. MR is fairly new, and we're looking at utilising the HTC devices, so not Oculus, but HTC. Although Oculus has now come out with a puck as well, but HTC, we feel, is better suited to a training kind of framework because of its hardware setup. But in terms of research, I haven't really seen, well, I haven't seen anyone do presentations on it, and I haven't really read too much at all about MR. So yeah, it's kind of gone from VR to, and augmented reality at the moment is kind of the big thing, whereas MR is just kind of sitting on the side. But I think once people realise the possibilities from a training perspective in particular, it'll kind of, you know, start to gain some legs.
Okay. Morgan says, what has been the biggest struggle to strive for digital inclusion that you have personally been involved with?
Getting both internal and external stakeholders, so they're talking about not the people with disability, not necessarily families, but people in leadership positions, you know, government, and those who have money. So we're talking, you know, maybe corporates, to actually understand the potential for this type of technology. And it is a bit of a risk. Look, I'll admit that. It's about kind of, I'm almost saying basically, let's create something that, well, let's take something that doesn't necessarily exist, give me money to be able to create it, and we'll then go and deploy it. You know, that's kind of what we're asking for in some instances. And even on Friday, we had, you know, we put in any number of grant applications, and we had one knocked back. We thought it was a given, particularly when you look at the potential for it, and the training that could exist. But you know, simply knocked back. And you know, we ask those questions of why, and obviously, you know, we want every grant that we put in. We understand that, you know, that's not always going to happen. So I think it's about being able to build the story, and then being able to sell the story as well. Not because we're, you know, wanting to sell our souls, but certainly because it's a really good story to have, potentially when you look at the impact of technology and what it can do. So if we can, I guess, convince those people with deep pockets to go down this technology road with us, it'd be a whole lot easier, because as you know, any of this particular hardware, it takes money to buy it in, it takes time to actually then understand it, and then particularly if we're creating new products or services, it takes time to be able to join all those dots together to get to an end product.
And we'll do last question. Alex would like to know, is there a time frame for when the smart technology will be rolled out, or is it just still in beta training at the moment?
No, so I mean, with tech, it's an ever-evolving kind of process. However, we've got within Endeavour Foundation, Chris is currently rolling out the virtual reality training to all of our services over the next 12 months. So we've actually started already. So what it looks like is there's 2 machines at the moment, because we've had to develop up the machines, and we're deploying 2 of those machines each into our what we're calling learning and lifestyle, so our day services. So there's about 35 across Queensland. So they're being rolled out as we speak over the next 6 months, and then we're looking at rolling the rest of the VR machines into our employment services in the last 6 months. So over the next 12-month period, all of our services will have VR technology and software, and we will continue to create scenarios and then push them to each of those machines, so that it'll be an ever-evolving process of scenarios that will simply be uploaded or pushed and uploaded so that training will continue to develop, and we can then scaffold the training, and that's the beauty of it. So as an example, we can create a program that looks at maybe how to, we're building a virtual kitchen at the moment, so learning life skills, how to cook a meal. But it may be really basic to be able to go, well, you know, identify the oven, the sink, and the dishwasher, and learn how to kind of stack a dishwasher. Something basic like that. Through to, oh, let's make a cup of coffee. Through to, let's make a sandwich for lunch. Right through to be able to cook a roast for dinner. So if we scaffold all of that training via VR, you know, that's potentially a whole, you know, maybe a year's worth of training that could exist, and, you know, supported with curriculum and what have you. So, and that's the beauty of it. We develop a pallet jack training scenario for one of our business services, and all of a sudden we can add, well, they're using pallet jacks. Now we develop a factory line that, you know, where they're packaging a whole heap of bottles. But that's you know, part two of that same scenario. So we can develop we can render in that particular building, so it looks exactly the same. We render in the pallet jack. We'll use MR, so we don't have to render it in. But then we can, you know, take that specific machine that maybe the business has just purchased, and rather than having to train that out again and again and again, we can actually render that into the VR and then deliver that across sites. And I guess, as you know, technology continues to evolve, we want to be at the forefront of that. So we want to be able to purchase, you know, the likes of Google Home or you know, various types of tech, and then go, well, what can we actually do with this, and then create from that new product. So in that context, I guess there isn't really a time frame. It's, you know, but obviously we don't want to be languishing, or we don't want to be just, you know, just playing around with it. We want to actually have outcomes from it. So, and that's probably the more important thing, as opposed to a time frame. So what's the outcome of this particular product or service, and are we actually getting anything from it?
Okay, thank you. If you haven't already, please go online and register for the collaborative, and you'll be able to access today's presentation and have the opportunity to ask further questions on this topic. Once again, thanks to you, Stewart. We have an upcoming webinar on the 17th of October about Digital First with the Queensland Government. We also have a few upcoming events with the NDIS Forum event happening this Friday, the 6th of October, as well as an innovation lunch with Professor Gregory Alexander on the 17th of November. Please check the collaborative for more information on these upcoming events. Once again, I'd like to thank the members of the collaborative research team, the Queensland Government, and Stewart. And if you have any further questions, please email us at sat@communityresourcing.com.au. And thank you everyone for your attendance today.